About 200 years ago the first railway was used in the UK, and since then the popularity of the railway exploded. It was the main form of transport for most British people, and at the system's greatest extent in 1914 there were about 20,000 miles of track, run by 120 different companies. The railway has lost popularity with commercial flights taking off and the mass production of affordable cars. Scotland, where I live, has 359 stations, 8 cities, and about 5.5 million people that reside there. A few years ago, I left Scotland for an interrail journey around Europe, and it was a great way to see a place, flowing through the main arteries of countries, through the different landscapes, seeing what the land has to offer. While running one day, I thought, why don't I travel around Scotland more? I could be the first person to visit every city in Scotland by train. I decided I was to go on an adventure around the country I call home. Train was the most convenient mode of transport, as each of our cities has a train station. Scotland is not a particularly populated country, but it's quite long, stretching from the lowlands of Glasgow and Edinburgh up to the highlands and then out to the islands. There is approximately 5 million Scots still here, not all of them wearing kilts and a ski and do to swashbuckle when a disagreement comes up. But there are over 100 million passenger journeys a year up here. A dark, quiet Queen Street greeted me on my maiden voyage, and off I went, exploring.
Stirling Castle. One of the coolest things I think about having the drone is a perspective that whoever built the castle, lived in the castle, never had. They never had the opportunity to go and get images from above. It's quite interesting. But yes, Stirling off the list. Beautiful day here. We just need to get back on the train now and head to our next city. Let's go.
We are now approaching Perth. Change here for services to Inverness. Please mind the gap when alighting from this train.
Given its central location, Perth was perfectly placed to become a key transport centre with the coming of the railways. Perth Station was built in 1848, and this painting of Perth Station heading south shows one of the trains after a shooting season heading back down to London. The station is massive and was one of the first stations in Scotland to have a line to all major cities in Scotland. This drove more passengers towards Perth and made the town prosperous, but with the nationalisation of the railways in the 1950s, the city of Perth's railway lines were closing and being rerouted through other locations. The station has much stayed the same since its heyday, as you can see from the painting to current day, with the clock having not moved in over 150 years. And just like that, I was back on another locomotive and off to the next wonderful place. I hydrated with Scotland's finest as I flowed through the marvellous landscape. The scenery that met me was, well, breathtaking.
I arrived in Inverness, Scotland's most northerly city. They like to call it the gateway to the Highlands, and this is where the true Scottish adventure begins for most tourists, being the most common starting point with the North Coast 500. I was doing the opposite of that trip. I was doing the Middle of Scotland 450. A solo expedition with no real understandable benefit. I'm a bit like the first expeditioners to the North Pole or to the summit of Everest. No real benefit of doing so, other than to see what it's like there and to say that you've done it. I'm sure those successful expeditions have stories of camaraderie with unexpected twists and turns. I'm just a man with a camera observing what my backyard has to offer. The sense of adventure seems hard to grasp from the outside looking in. Most people who take this journey with me have linear paths that they almost don't feel because of the commonality of it all. Commuters rarely notice change along their commuting, as their brain switches into autopilot. I, on the other hand, am seeing and feeling all new sights and sounds, even though I've been on these lines before. Today, I am just jam-packing them together like a trilogy box set, each leg adding and referring to what came before it and what might come after. I don't have much time in each place, as I need to catch another train. I was back on the rails, hurtling along the track, having changed my trajectory from heading north and now bearing off to the east. Flying by swaths of farmland, small towns and wind turbines. The landscape jostling up and down with mountains that watch over everything. Sesame seed-like sheep and farmers that work the land. All get mysteriously watched as I encounter them all, but only for just a few seconds, each with their all very individual story for that day. I can tell when I have made it into the Strathspey region of whisky, as the warehouses covered in black show me like when a tomato turns red ready to eat. There's whisky in those buildings. I can only imagine where this whisky will land after it leaves the shores of Scotland. It will have a similar journey to the one I am on, but most likely by sea, and probably more purposeful. It's obvious when you get closer to a city, as the stops become shorter between stations, the carriage becomes fuller with people, and buildings become grander in scale and design. Aberdeen is called the Granite City because of all the grey granite buildings. Everything is made from this stuff. It's a place that is very obviously built around the resources it had. The ships in the harbour obviously for work and not for pleasure, having more space for cargo and less for seafaring tourism, and the building material of choice was obviously hard grey granite. This may be the most obvious city in Scotland. If you were blindfolded and dropped in a city, I'm sure you could locate yourself by the building material alone. Obviously I had to come here, but what wasn't obvious was the surprise of the next train journey down the east coast. This one surpassed all little expectation I had. The gorges down this coast of Scotland, cut into the land, perfect hiding spots for smaller boats, create a wonderful contrast from the vast ocean. The coastline, which has been battered by hard seas for thousands of years, has been lovingly left still calm for my voyage, as I trundle south for the first time, having golden hour create shadows and change the colour of the surrounding land. I'm sure I could convince someone that I'm in California for a second. The only giveaway would be the unconstructed coastline, now used for farm animals and small houses. I come across what I can only describe as the most idyllic golf course and think if I played golf, here would be a great place for me to lose golf balls into the sea, and I'm sure there are plenty of mishits lining the beach. I am surprised this coastline doesn't get more recognition with the beauty that I am witnessing, maybe because of the smallest of sample sizes, that 95% of the time is gusty and horrible, but that's par for the course. At this point, I have been on trains for most of my day and have become quite a pro at it. The swift showing of ticket to the conductor and the quick getting of the perfect seat, which will have the most interesting views of the world. The unfortunate reality is, to have the true reflection of the line, I would need to sit on the opposite side to have it all mapped out. I have lots of internal thoughts about what I have seen so far, one of them being, Scotland has a lot of wind turbines, a lot of sheep and a lot of greenery. It's really quite a good place to grow up, as you aren't far from being in the countryside. In the UK, you are never more than 70 miles away from the coast. Having grown up a stone's throw away from the Atlantic Ocean, it resonates with me and makes this journey much more digestible for the viewer. We were at one side of the country before, and the sea represents the other. I don't think a landlocked lap would be as palatable. Dundee is city number 5. Surprisingly, it only holds 2 platforms for a population of 150,000, which seems minimalistic. The large water structures I passed on the train have also stopped in Dundee for some maintenance works. These skyscrapers swim out into hard seas to harvest fuels. The scale of these demons is quite extraordinary, being as tall and as slender as a building, but being able to move and navigate through the water. Dundee provides a safe haven for seafarers, as it is where the River Tay runs into the North Sea. The V&A Museum, which is the building in front of me, has been designed by Kengo Kuma, who is a world-famous Japanese architect, who designed the National Stadium for the Tokyo Olympics. Now that I've said it's of Japanese inspiration, it makes sense. Like one of those you'll kick yourself when I tell you the answer. It doesn't look like anything around it, so it's probably from another culture. The design is inspired by the cliffside around Dundee. The sun is now set, so my camera work is much the same wherever I am. I managed to capture a few things. Dunfermline is the newest city in Scotland, gaining its city status in 2022. It's not got the same ease of access as the other cities and required a change of line. It again is only a 2-platform station, which shows the lack of population in Scotland that a city can survive on 2 platforms. Dunfermline was dark and lonely when I got there, and I didn't stray far away from the station. I wouldn't have more than 20 minutes there before I had to get back to where I changed line before to head onwards. Dunfermline is also the reason I am one of the first people to visit all cities in Scotland in a day via train. There has only been 8 cities for less than a year. I was leading the way for future city expeditioners. To go on a train journey around Scotland, I've missed maybe the most famous rail bridge in the world. Some would say is blasphemous. This is the 4th rail bridge at night, and this is what it looks like during the day. I'm not overly concerned, as I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, so I'm sure I'll have plenty of time to see it again. I had finally arrived in Edinburgh, the current capital, where I went to university and where I met Flora. I know this place relatively well, and it was the last stop before getting back to Glasgow and being finished with trains, at least for today. It's where I would see my first kilt of the trip, as it was a rugby day, which means plenty of kilts and beverages in the capital. Waverley Station has a full glass ceiling, which is impressive and must take an amount of cleaning that I would not be capable of. The dark of the night makes this penultimate stop illuminate with pubs and people, some of which were also joining me in a train journey this evening back to wherever they will rest their heads and hopefully wake up unhungover tomorrow. I enjoyed my first and last beverage of the trip, having accomplished something in nothing. I received a thumbs up from a stranger Somehow he must have knew my accomplishment, and I got on what would be the busiest and thankfully the last train of the day.
There we go, back in the same spot, approximately 15 hours after we left here. We made it round Scotland in one day to every city. Now it's time to go to bed.
On my expedition, I realised something while I was on my 4th train. This is a horrible way to explore the cities of Scotland. The lack of time in each wonderful place really means you are just barely scraping the surface of what each place offers. Each city is unique and is worth a visit, but definitely for more than 40 minutes. Although I spent more time on trains than most people would ever want to do in one day, it was remarkable to have the complete view of what Scotland's landscape has. Having it unfold in front of my eyes was marvellous. Each leg is vastly different from each other, and I was rushing to let the camera take in as much as possible. The small hills of the lowlands to the treeless rocky mountains heading towards the north, the vast sea view down the east coast which was magnificent at that time of day, the different environmental factors which change the land and the resources. Farming dominates the middle part of each leg, but then you get to a city and you can see what native materials they have used as resources to build their superstructures. Each and every sleeper and bit of ballast has only been in place for a maximum of 200 years. Each bridge and viaduct I crossed, likely the same, all of which were engineered for a purpose of prosperity and connecting people to places. Before that, this type of journey would be impossible for even the most determined of adventurers, and I had the luxury of just deciding to do it one morning. All of this wonderful adventure was an idea which turned into a let's see if it's possible. The appreciation I have for Scotland's landscape has massively increased. I didn't know how good it was watching the in-between parts, the not thought about bits, and I think that's the big takeaway from this. Wherever you are in the world, I'm sure there's great amounts of beauty that you'll pass by without realising it's right there, and it always has been. Train is a fantastic way to see the connecting parts, and it's right in my backyard. The story is right in front of me, and it always has been. On the line.